This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best all-in-one platform for all of your website building needs. Hey guys, it's Celestia, and okay, do you guys remember that tier list I made like a million years ago ranking the best and worst art advice? Well, that was fun, I had a good time, and you guys seemed to like it. So an eon later, I've decided to do another one ranking TikTok art hacks. There's certainly no shortage of them, and they range from shockingly fantastic to painfully awful, so it should be an experience. I've compiled a bunch of them, some that you guys recommended, some that I found on my own, and some that I've seen other YouTubers cover in their own videos. And we're going back to tiermaker.com to see which ones are truly S-tier art hacks according to my totally objective expert-level opinions. But before we do, let me take a moment to thank a longtime partner of the channel and the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Listen, let's say all of these art hacks are so good that by using them you manage to create masterpieces that put the Mona Lisa to shame. They're not, but bear with me. It doesn't matter, no matter how good that art is. If you want to pursue it professionally, you still need a well-made, professional-looking portfolio to display it on that will make it shine and show your clients that you take your craft seriously. That's where Squarespace comes in, because after years of first-hand experience, I can say with confidence that, at least in my opinion, they're the best website building and hosting platform out there, and the best option for any artist looking to create a portfolio that they can really be proud of. I made both my previous branded, cutesy portfolio and my new professional version there, and both were just as easy to make even though they're very different. And not only is Squarespace a godsend for portfolio building, they have a massive library of templates with exceptional options for any kind of site that you want to build. And if that site happens to be an online store, they offer everything you need to turn it into one. The ability to manage payments and inventory, handle shipping and fulfillment, and even boost your SEO to help you get more eyes on your site and maximize the number of customers shopping there. It's perfect for selling merch and really any kind of physical goods, but selling services like consultations, event management, editing, and even art commissions is just as easy with all of the tools that Squarespace offers. A streamlined workflow, built-in appointment scheduling, email marketing tools, and so much more. And your customers have just as many options as you do, too, because they offer all of the most popular payment methods like Klarna, ACH Direct Debit, Apple Pay, Afterpay, and ClearPay, and even allow you the option to send individualized branded invoices to specific clients. So you can start accepting orders from all around the world with just a few clicks. Whether you're an artist in need of a portfolio, an entrepreneur building an online store, a creator setting up an interactive blog, or a small business owner making a landing page, Squarespace is the place to do it. And you can find out yourself by going to squarespace.com to get your own free trial today. And once you've built the perfect site that you're ready to launch, you can get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain by going to squarespace.com/DuchessCelestia, linked in the description. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and please go check them out. Now, let's rank some art hacks. Right off the bat though, I want to make one thing clear. I'm not ranking any of these based on educational value. I've already made a video discussing why I think art hacks are fundamentally incapable of offering any educational value at all. Even if they are sharing effective techniques, which a lot of them aren't, by nature, they're too short to be able to explain to you why those techniques work, so you don't learn anything more than how to apply them in the very specific instance demonstrated in the video. Some of them are only effective in certain settings or styles, some of them are based on fundamentals that you actually need to study to understand how to apply them properly. Some of them are just outright incorrect but still visually appealing. The list goes on. I don't think art hacks are an effective way to learn art, and you can watch that video for more on why if you want. It's linked in the iCard above. But that doesn't mean I think they're worthless, especially for people who are mostly just doing art for fun. A lot of them make aspects of its creation easier and less overwhelming through their simplicity. And even if the most they can offer is a simple, surface-level way to make your art look a little better in a way that you enjoy, that's valuable enough to be worthwhile. So I'm ranking these solely based on that value and pretty much nothing deeper than that. And these are also just my opinions based on my experiences and not an expert analysis, so bear that in mind too. But you've waited more than long enough for me to get to the actual tier list, so let's get to the actual tier list. The first TikTok we'll look at is actually 3 art hacks, but I'll rank them each separately. So let's start with number 1. Adding a white outline to your character to make them stand out from the background. I'm gonna put this one in B tier, which might surprise anyone who's seen my old art, but my old art is actually the reason I'm ranking it lower. Yes, a white outline absolutely is effective at making the subject stand out from the background, but it's so effective that it's really easy to overuse. Ideally, you should try to make your subject stand out from their environment by using varied values, making them either lighter or darker than the elements surrounding them, allowing the contrast of the piece to draw focus to the character without the need for a white outline to do that for you. In my experience though, I use the white outline so often and in almost every setting that I didn't need to use values to make the character stand out, which means I didn't learn values, and that massively held me back. In some instances though, I don't see any problem with it at all. Actually, in pieces like the one in the example from the TikTok where the background is just a solid color and not an environment, I would put it in S tier, because there are no background elements to use to vary the values and create contrast beyond just shifting the color alone. And given that that is the example the TikTok used, I'm actually gonna bump it up to A tier, because maybe the creator did just mean to do it only in that setting. off-putting. Okay, number 2, adding splashes of the background color to the finished piece to make it feel more cohesive and put together. I'm putting this in A tier because that's great advice that always makes a piece look better, and it only got bumped down from S tier because he didn't explain that it's because it's essentially adding reflected light and just basically said to add it randomly to a few key areas without saying which areas or why, which limits how effective the hack actually is. I get that short form content doesn't let you explain stuff thoroughly, like I said, but even just using the words reflected light would have given people enough to go on for a Google search that then could tell them which areas to add it to. And finally, number 3, adding a canvas texture on a multiply layer to the finished piece to make it look more like it was painted on, well, a canvas, making it feel less digital. There were other art hacks using different textures and brushes that achieved a similar effect that I cut because they're basically the same, but it's worth mentioning that it doesn't have to look like a canvas so long as it looks textured and not flat. It's definitely A tier for me because I always do this and I always like the way it makes the piece look, and the only reason it's not in S tier is because some people actually don't want their art looking less digital and might not find that effect appealing. It definitely depends on the style and personal preference. It does make art look more finished in my experience though. Okay, next TikTok. Basically just wildly draw a bunch of random squiggles on your canvas. Try to find recognizable shapes within them and use them to establish interesting compositions for your pieces. I love this one. I think it's great and I tried it out myself for one of my Spooktober prompts and really enjoyed the process. I'm putting it in A tier because it's genuinely fantastic when you don't have any ideas for what you want the piece to look like beforehand and need inspiration, and it's also amazing for just studying form and composition and even just messing around for fun. But it doesn't work quite as well when you do already have at least some kind of an idea for your piece and how you want it to look, and it doesn't always lead to a particularly balanced composition since shapes formed by random squiggles aren't always formed in a way that takes, for example, the rule of thirds into account. Not that you have to, but it's usually a good idea to, and I feel like using this method would mean a lot of revisions in order to create a composition that effectively draws the viewer's eye where you want it. Next art hack, do what the pros do and use 3D models as references rather than just drawing freehand. More specifically, by using Unreal Engine's massive library of existing models and entire environments to essentially create custom references of exactly what you need, right down to the light source and the details. And this is immediate S tier. This will save you so much time, ensure that your piece's perspective and composition are always on point, and does wonders to help you visualize how you want it to look. If using Unreal Engine is too difficult or too much of a time commitment or you just can't download it, you can also try out Sketchfab. It's an online library of user-made 3D models that you can view and freely rotate without downloading any of them or the programs necessary to open them. It's obviously going to be less effective than running Unreal and actually being able to interact with those objects as if they're a video game and put them into custom environments, and you can't change the light source or anything to my knowledge, but it is still handy if you're in a rush or don't want to download anything. Point is, yes, 3D model reference is the ultimate S tier. I love this hack. Next hack is from the same person who is graciously sharing their art school wisdom, and we love them for it, and it's to just flip a drawing that you've already done of a character that you now want to draw from behind, erase all of the details except the outline, and then use that as a starting point to draw the details of their backside instead, because their silhouette will stay the same no matter which way they're facing. And yes, this one is great. I use it all the time for character sheets because it saves a ton of time and makes it really easy to keep the character consistent from both perspectives, in terms of proportions and clothing placement. I'm putting it in A tier because it's awesome if you need a quick behind shot of a character that you've already drawn, and it's a lifesaver for character sheets, but it does recognizably look very much like you literally just flipped your existing drawing around. So if you're making a comic or something where you want it to feel realistic in an actual environment and not just in the detached setting of a character sheet that doesn't need to, it might not be as effective. I'd also just always recommend getting another reference of the character from behind to make sure all of the details are accurate, which would result in a different silhouette that this obviously wouldn't work with. But if you aren't working from reference or you're just pressed for time, it's definitely a good hack. Up next is to use what this TikToker calls the circle principle, which is essentially to use a circle as your point of reference for any eye that you draw, because ultimately the eyeball is a sphere, no matter the angle, the style, or how much of it is covered by the eyelid. So it's pretty much always going to be effective. And yes, absolutely 100% S tier. Any art hack that's universally applicable to literally any artist regardless of their style is a gift from the art gods. Okay, the next one is a far cry from S tier. Wow. Okay, it's to draw legs less like straight lines and more like stairs with a step in the middle. I'm gonna put this in C tier, and I honestly want to put it lower than that because this is exactly the kind of shit that makes me hate art hacks. The whole, this version of the human body is wrong and this version is right, with a big X over a version of the human body that 100% actually exists in reality, and a check mark over one that isn't how every body actually looks. This drives me insane. Legs that look like the first one exist, and legs that look like the second one exist, and the comments are full of people saying, I guess my legs are wrong then, for a reason. The only reason this isn't going straight to D tier or even F tier is because fundamentally speaking, it's not completely faceless, and I get what they're trying to say. The leg isn't like one long tube, and the lower half under the knee is going to be further back than the upper half. But the degree to which the knee protrudes is not always that dramatic, and every leg is different, and this is just not it, chief, and it is exactly why anatomy art hacks are the bane of my existence. Anyway, next art hack, copy and paste your rendering. Basically, to use the example in the TikTok, if you're drawing a character with 2 socks visible and you've already rendered one hem on one sock, just copy and paste it onto the other sock. And I'm gonna put this one in B tier because I have mixed feelings about it. It definitely is a convenient time saver, but it also looks very obviously copy and pasted if you don't revise it at all, which to me takes away from the piece's overall quality. And I mean, yes, 2 hems of the same sock on the same person are gonna look very similar, but they're not gonna look the same. The light will still hit them each differently, and the fabric will still fold differently. It's definitely a good starting point to copy one, move it on top of the other, and then revise it not to be identical, but I wouldn't personally advise just leaving it exactly as is. If you don't care about it looking realistic and just want to save time though, I mean, you do you. Okay, the next art hack is significantly worse, but I guess it also boils down to you do you. It's to essentially use the liquefy tool to make your lines thinner. Look, if this works for you and it makes your life easier, that's awesome, but I cannot for the life of me imagine this being easier than just erasing lines that are too thick so that they're thinner, or just practicing making thinner line art in the first place. So it's going in D tier for me. Liquefy also makes lines look wonky and inconsistent to at least some degree, which you can even see in the example, which is all the more reason to just erase them instead, which I feel like would also take less time anyway and yield a better result. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Next up is the stripe hack. Because striped patterns on fabric obviously distort as the fabric folds, you can't just draw them straight and have it look right. With this hack, you do just draw them straight, and then you use the liquefy tool on the edge setting and just draw lines with it where the wrinkles should be, distorting the lines surprisingly effectively in the process. I really like this one a lot, and I was actually surprised at how well it worked. I'm putting it in A tier because it is helpful, but also not always accurate to reality, and I would definitely still personally consult a reference of a striped shirt folding like the one I'm drawing to make sure the wrinkles are being liquefied accurately to that. The method itself, though, is still one that I would use in addition to a reference. The next art hack is for drawing any pose, and it's to pinpoint the joints and stick outline of your reference and draw them over it before actually using it. It's incredibly simple and pretty well known, but that doesn't make it less S tier because it is definitely S tier. It's what I've been doing myself for a very long time, and it makes it significantly easier to isolate and understand how the body itself actually looks underneath clothing, hair, or anything else that might be obscuring it. And it simplifies it so that you can focus solely on copying its proportions accurately first before worrying about any of the details. So you know the limbs are all going to be the right length and in the right position before you actually start making them look like limbs. This is another rare art hack that I think is also probably universally applicable regardless of an artist's style, at least assuming they use references. So thank you again, art gods, and also TikTok user Sparketh. Okay, next hack. Instead of copying the individual shapes of your reference, block it out so that it's essentially just a silhouette that you can then exaggerate as needed. This one is really good in a lot of settings. The TikTok user who posted it is specifically referring to its benefits for artists who draw exaggerated poses and anatomy, and it definitely is great for that, but I would argue that it's actually even more beneficial for character design and composition. For the former, using that blocked out silhouette to then add the shapes of the character's outfit and general design to is a great way to test whether or not that silhouette is recognizable and distinctive, which is an important factor when designing any character. And for composition, seeing just the silhouette surrounded by negative space is immensely helpful when considering their placement in that negative space, because you can focus solely on how the form of the subject looks in relation to the space around them without being distracted by any other factor like detail, colors, or values. The only reason I'm putting it in A tier rather than S tier is because if you're also using this method for establishing the character's pose specifically, rather than just general form and placement, it might not result in the most accurate proportions without also having the original reference to consult to. Okay, the next art hack is iconic and hands down the best one on the internet. Just cover everything you can't draw about a character's face with hair. Immediate S tier, obviously. I mean, you can't go wrong with just turning everything you draw into Cousin It. The follow-up for if you can't draw hair, where you just cover the character in bandages, is even better. Both go in S tier if S stands for satire, which I'm 99.9% sure both of these TikToks are, and F if taken even vaguely seriously, because obviously just avoiding everything you can't draw is the easiest way to literally never improve. Next up, instead of drawing eyebrows like, this, break them down into one long rectangle shape and one triangle shape at the end. This is going in C tier. It's technically accurate and helpful, at least in most cases, but it isn't applicable to all eyebrows, it doesn't work for all art styles, and most importantly, no one in the history of anything was drawing eyebrows like the before example. And I can't not see this entire art hack like an old infomercial where we're supposed to believe that the person we're watching couldn't manage to open a carton of milk without spilling it all over themselves, their home, their families, and everything dear to them, and needed this incredible new milk opening tool that's being advertised to save them from their own ineptitude. And I have to dock this hack points for that. Anyway, next hack. When you're drawing a room and struggling with perspective, draw its 2D floor plan and then use the distort tool to turn it into the actual floor of the room in accordance with the perspective that you want for the piece. Then build perspective lines up from that and use the now distorted shapes of the furniture placements as bases from which to actually draw the furniture in that perspective. I really like this one and have used it myself on a few occasions and found it to be pretty effective and time-saving. I'm torn as to where to put it though, because it's not perfect by any means. You have to be really careful to ensure that your perspective lines built upon this base are accurate, because it's not like you can build the furniture directly up from that base as if the top of it is going to be viewed from the same perspective as the bottom. And it often takes more time to establish accurate perspective lines upward from the base than it would be to just create or find a 3D reference of it. So if the biggest appeal is saving time, it might not always be the best. Still, it is handy, and I feel like it would go a long way to make beginners feel less overwhelmed by perspective. So I think I'm gonna put it in A tier, but like the bottom of A tier. Okay, I really like this next art hack. Drawing feet like teeth, which sounds unhinged without context, but hear me out. Or hear TikTok user Ulaine something out, I guess. A common art hack for drawing teeth is to draw the negative space between them, that being the gums, rather than each individual tooth, because the latter tends to look really weird and over-detailed. It's a good art hack. This one is to use the same concept on feet, especially if you struggle with toes. Draw the basic shapes of the feet, and then draw the negative space between the toes rather than each individual toe. I love this one, and I think it's incredibly helpful, especially given that not only are toes difficult to get right, overly detailed toes are often just as weird to look at as overly detailed teeth. I'm putting it in A tier, and the only reason it's not going in S tier is because everyone learns differently, and I feel like people who can't visualize things a certain way might find this a little less effective. I really like the next hack too. To draw more confidently, use a material that you can't erase. I made a whole video on this because it teaches you the one skill that digital art can't: improvisation. It's in the iCard above if you want a more detailed explanation, but essentially, if you want to thoroughly develop your skills, you need to practice correcting your mistakes rather than just undoing them. Having your mistakes be permanent forces you to accept that making them is inevitable, which does wonders for what this TikTok mentioned, giving you confidence and alleviating anxiety about messing up. And it teaches you how to improvise and change the piece to incorporate mistakes in a way that still looks good, which is just an incredibly helpful learning experience all around. You can do this digitally if you force yourself not to use the eraser or undo tools, but it is immensely easier with traditional art. Either way, it's going in very high A tier because it's beneficial in pretty much every conceivable way, and it would be in S tier if I didn't know that for a select few people, it would probably actually increase their anxiety to a point that art would no longer be fun for them. If they stuck with it long enough, it would end up alleviating that eventually, but that process might not be worthwhile if it's so miserable that they can't enjoy creating art at all, especially if that makes them give up. The next one's a color palette art hack. You take the palette that you already have, and then overlay the base color that you want your piece to have over it and reduce the opacity. It gives you a color palette that's more cohesive based on the setting that you intend for what you're drawing. And I will absolutely agree that it does so effectively, but it also ends up muddying the color palette if done with too much opacity to the point that all of the colors are way too similar for any to stand out, and it leaves any accent colors too muted to serve their purpose properly. This one feels like a good tool so long as it's done in careful moderation, but can easily be counterproductive if it isn't, so I'm putting it in B tier. Okay, next we've got the chain art hack. Instead of drawing each individual link of the chain as line art, draw the basic shapes of each one in a long line, draw a thick line of your line art color behind that, and then erase that background line so that it essentially becomes the outline of the chain shapes. I like this one. It's fast and easy, and it makes chains a lot less tedious to draw for sure. For certain styles that are either more simplistic or just less realistic, I think it would be perfect. But if you are going for more realism, this isn't an art hack I would recommend, simply because chain links in reality aren't consistently and constantly forward-facing like that. Look at any number of photos of chains and you'll see that they twist and turn and almost never follow a consistent pattern like this hack's example. This art hack might help you establish the flow of the chain and the general sizing and spacing of the chain links, but you would have to revise it to reflect the natural way that the chain would actually fall afterwards. That in mind, I'm gonna put it in B tier, but like fondly. Alright, the next one, it gives me an aneurysm. I'm sorry, and I'm saying this right now, it's the singular F tier. Art hack, a lot of people study anatomy to get better at drawing, but it's actually a lot easier if you don't. Yeah, people say it's better to study than it is to just wing it, but it's actually a lot easier to just wing it. Genius. miss. Yeah, it is easier to not study. It also won't help you grow as an artist and will constantly and indefinitely hold you back from improving, because easy things don't yield significant results. You get what you put in. If you barely try, you barely improve. If you try hard, you improve a lot. I understand and see the value in the message that just doing art for fun and not wanting to improve is a valid approach to it, and that studying anatomy isn't necessary if that's how you feel. But that is literally the one singular instance in which I think this so-called advice is actually applicable. If you have absolutely any desire to improve at art, taking the easy road is always the wrong call. Okay, now let's end this tier list off with what might be the most popular TikTok art hack of all time, the pizza overlay. There are a lot of variations of this one, and I wasn't even able to find the original source, but essentially, once you finish a piece, you airbrush a circle over the character's face on a separate layer. In some iterations, the initial circle is blue, and in others, it's red. Then you airbrush a smaller circle on top of it. If you started with blue, the next circle is red. If you started with red, it's yellow. Then, sometimes, if you started with blue, you add a third circle in the center that's yellow. Then you put that layer on either overlay or soft light mode and adjust the opacity until it makes the character's face pop more in terms of color and saturation. I get why this one is so popular, and my gripes with it mainly extend to the fact that it doesn't explain why it works, and therefore neglects to acknowledge that it only works in certain settings, and why. But I did say I wouldn't rank these on educational value, so in this instance, I guess I can't hold that against it. This one's effectiveness does vary depending on the piece and how saturated its colors already were, but it does usually work, even if the difference it makes is subtle. It draws attention to the face, which is usually the subject, and it does make the piece pop more in the area that you typically want it to. So many people claim that this one makes them like their art significantly more that honestly, if the point of art hacks is to do that, it should be S tier. But I'm putting it in A tier simply because of how subjective and subtle it is. But I'm gonna end it at 20 art hacks because this video is definitely long enough already. I forgot how much fun these were though, wow. Again, these are all purely my opinions and not an expert analysis, so take the whole video and final tier list you're seeing now with a grain of salt. I'm sure you would rank them differently, and you can if you want to, because the tier list is linked in the description, as are all of the individual TikToks if you want to watch them yourselves, and I encourage you to if you want the voiceovers and full clips. And please let me know if you guys enjoyed this video, because there is no shortage of TikTok art hacks, and I would be happy to make a part 2 if you did. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Special thank you as always to channel members Joseph Solomon, TC Pratt, Haruki Saluzzo, Peachy, King Good James, Art of Amethyst Fable, Extinction Animation, Andy the Hedgehog, Kai the Memer, Jazz, Just Sayori, Stardust, Hailstorm, and Darkholder, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Jamisha Walker, Kim Yen, Crazy Asar, Gentong, Grace Nick Xavier, Blah Mage, TC Pratt, Finn, Celine Merriman, Eldritchia, The Stray Dog, Greg Noble, Decagon, Jenny Chan, Catbus, Lucy Yamajiki, Selena Bibi, Pryday, Totally Shogun, Insomniac Sleep Schedule, Ling Tang Wong, Marie Greer, Potato, Jazz, Voidwalker, Latte Tabby, Christian Cook, Adam Surovietz, Doriaki, Varius, Hailstorm, Emo Queen Jules, Lord Darkholder, Show, That's It, Craig, and Stardust, and I'll see you in the next one.